this before, but I thought this would be really fun. I am a fangirl, as you can probably tell by my posters. Those are all Star Wars, but if it's a fandom, I'm probably in it. One of my favorite fandoms is Criminal Minds. I'm also a true crime junkie, so I decided to put my love of both things together and do some research on the real life criminals that they talk about on Criminal Minds. So welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. This is going to be really fun. Before we get started, 2 warnings. Number 1, spoiler warning. If you don't want to be spoiled, you can watch the episode before you watch this. I'm going to try not to do spoilers, but I might slip. So, second warning, trigger warning. This is a disturbing case. All of them pretty much are going to be disturbing cases. And I don't want to trigger anybody, make anybody have a panic attack or whatever. So if you think this is going to bother you, then you probably shouldn't watch. I will try to not be very graphic, but it is what it is. So let's get started. The first episode of Criminal Minds was called Extreme Aggressor. And it is about women that are getting kidnapped. Prior to the BAU being called in, there were 4 women kidnapped and killed. As the show opens, we see a young lady sitting at her desk at work, emailing someone about a car. She leaves work, goes downstairs, the car is there with the man, and she gets in the car to test drive it. And when she's done with the test drive, they pull over, she looks under the hood, and the guy says, "You can get it checked out with your mechanic if you want to." So then he takes her back, supposedly back to where she came from. But this time, she doesn't drive, he does. And he doesn't take her back. So before the BAU gets called in, and they're investigating her disappearance, they go to her workplace, and they find that her computer, the whole hard drive had been erased. The only thing was a note on the screen, which read, "For heaven's sakes, catch me before I kill again. I cannot control myself." Because of that note, the BAU gets called in. And the reason why is because that note was left in lipstick on a mirror at a real murder. And he got dubbed the Lipstick Killer. His name was William Heirens. William Heirens was born in 1928 in Evanston, Illinois, to a poor family. His dad was an alcoholic, and his parents argued most of the time, and he would wander the streets trying to escape the arguing in his house. So eventually, he started burglarizing houses. When he was 13, he was arrested for 13 burglaries, but he only confessed to 11. He was sent to the Gabalt Home for Wayward Boys in Terre Haute, Indiana. And while he was there, he continued to burglarize houses. So he got arrested again. While he was at the Gabalt Home for Wayward Boys, he continued to burglarize. While he was at the Gabalt Home for Wayward Boys, he continued to burglarize houses, and he was arrested again and sent to St. Bede Academy, which was a Catholic prep school. When he was 16, he was released, and before his release, he was accepted into the University of Chicago's special education program. He couldn't afford the dorm fees or tuition, so he worked various different odd jobs and continued to burglarize houses. About that time, some murders started in Chicago. The first being 43-year-old Josephine Ross. She was found by her daughter, and she was in bed. She had been stabbed and her throat was slit. Her body had been cleaned and her wounds had been taped up. She had a red skirt around her head, and the whole apartment had been cleaned and there was no forensic evidence left. The second murder was 31-year-old Frances Brown. She was found by her housekeeper. She was half in and half out of the bathtub. She had been shot in the head and stabbed repeatedly. And she had a stocking around her neck and pajamas wrapped around her head. And again, the body was clean as well as the apartment. When they took the stocking off her neck, the knife was still embedded in her neck. There were some similarities between these two murders. There was an open window. The bodies were cleaned. The apartments were cleaned. There was no SA done to the bodies. And their heads were wrapped. 7-year-old Suzanne Degnan was abducted from her bed, taken out an open window, and taken to a laundry room in the basement of an apartment building. There was a ransom note left at the crime scene that said, "Get ready and wait, $20,000 in 5s and 10s. Do not call the police or FBI and burn this for her safety." So the police got an anonymous tip to look in storm drains. So they looked in a storm drain and they saw blonde hair floating on the water and they thought it was a doll's head. It wasn't a doll's head. They found her in various storm drains around the neighborhood. And they also found parts of her in the laundry room in the basement of the building. So they arrested 65-year-old Hector Verberg. He was the janitor in the building. They tortured him and tried to make him confess to the crime. They tied his hands together and strung him up, causing a permanent shoulder injury. He was eventually let go when they realized there was no way someone could endure that type of pain and not confess. Mr. Verberg successfully sued Chicago PD because of his shoulder injury. Another suspect in Suzanne Degnan's abduction was Richard Russell Thomas. He was arrested in Arizona for molesting his own daughter. While he was in custody, he confessed to the abduction and murder of the 7-year-old girl. So 2 detectives from Chicago went to Arizona to question him. Richard Russell Thomas was a surgical nurse in the Army and left ransom notes at his crime scenes. So I think he did it. Just a little girl. The story is really sad because I think this guy was innocent and he was just there and he was a scapegoat. So let me know what you think down in the comments. Now we're going to talk about how he got arrested. Shortly before his arrest, a woman was shot through an open window through her arm. Also, Ellen Peterson was attacked in her apartment. The intruder came in through the skylight, hit her in the head with a lamp, and tied her up. And that's all he did. I don't know why he decided not to do anything else. And I don't know if there was a second exit from the apartment because her sister came home. And that might have been why he didn't finish. But I don't think he would have gone back out the skylight. So I'm not sure. And in all of the literature I read, I didn't see anywhere where it had a firm conclusion as to why he didn't do more than that. So her sister came home and she could not get the door open. I don't know if she forgot her key or the key didn't work or the door was broken. It doesn't say anywhere. But a teenage boy came by and helped her get into the apartment. William Heirens was 17 years old at the time. Now, this does not mean that William Heirens was the one that helped her get into the apartment. It's just extremely suspicious. Because when he helped her get in, he saw her sister tied up. He went to her, he untied her, he checked on her, he cradled her in his arms. And then, when he realized that she was hurt and needed help, he told her sister, "Stay here, I'm gonna go get help, I will be right back." So he went downstairs and talked to the superintendent of the building and said, "A woman's been hurt, she needs help." But he didn't go back upstairs, he left. Now, because of all these crimes, a superintendent of a building was patrolling it at night. And he saw 17-year-old William Heirens come out of an apartment that he had burgled. So the cops were called, they caught up with him, and they could not subdue him. He had a gun, which he showed the superintendent of the building but did not shoot. And the literature says that he shot at the cops, but the gun jammed. But in an interview with William Heirens, he said that he never shot the gun. The cops shot at him 3 times and missed. And there just happened to be an off-duty officer that saw the scuffle, and he went over to help, and he hit Heirens over the head with a flower pot. That still did not subdue him. It took 3 flower pots, 3, to knock this guy out. So what they learned later was, as a child, he'd had a head injury, which gave him a really high tolerance to pain. And if you know anything about true crime, many criminals, especially serial killers, have a history of a head injury as a child. They arrested him, they took him to jail, and put him in the infirmary to recover. And they burnt him with cigarettes. They poked him with pins. They gave him truth serum. No, I'm sorry. They gave him sodium pentothal, which has classically been known as a truth serum, but it's not. It just lowers your inhibitions and you talk. It makes you talk. It doesn't make you tell the truth. They also gave him a spinal tap. I have no idea what that was about. I have no criminal background or legal background. I'm a nurse, so I know there's no reason to give somebody a spinal tap because they were arrested and hit on the head. I have no idea. I don't know if it was just torture or if they thought by testing his spinal fluid they could find out something about him. I mean, they didn't even have DNA back then. This was in the 40s. So, I don't have a clue. I'm guessing it was just torture. So, in his pants pockets, there was a letter from someone named George Merman. When he was given the sodium pentothal and questioned, he said George did it. So, they assumed that George was an accomplice. And for some reason, later they came to the conclusion that George was an alter personality of William Heirens. I have no idea why they came to the conclusion that he had dissociative identity disorder, but they did. Now, William Heirens confessed because they told him if he confessed, they would take the death penalty off of the table and he would serve 1 life sentence. So on the day he was supposed to confess publicly, he recanted. They took him back to jail. They walked him by the electric chair every chance they got to scare him. So then they gave him a new deal. If he would confess, he would not get the death penalty, but instead get 3 life sentences. So he confessed again. When the police searched his dorm room, they found guns, jewelry, war bonds, and radios, and he had not sold any of the things he stole. He spent the cash that he stole, but he didn't sell any of the things that he stole. He also stole a book of pictures of Nazi commanders from a World War II vet. So, of course, they assumed if he had pictures of Nazis that he was a murderer. I personally don't think that he did it. The burglaries, yes. The murders, no. So let me know down in the comments what you think. Do you think he was guilty? Because I don't. Also, in his dorm room, they found a book on sexual deviancy. So that was another circumstance that made them think that he had done it. But there was no SA to the bodies. So I don't see how they connect the two. The story hit the Chicago Tribune on June 16th, 1947. There were fingerprints found at Frances Brown's crime scene that did not match William Heirens until 12 days later when it did. Also, on Suzanne Degnan's ransom note, there were 2 fingerprints and a palm print that they said matched William Heirens. In the 90s, his lawyer tried to get his sentence overturned and at least get a new trial. He hired a retired FBI fingerprint examiner who said he had never seen fingerprint evidence like that at a crime in his whole career, because the prints were from the left margin to the right margin, meaning they had been rolled on a fingerprint card. When you touch something, you don't get margin to margin fingerprints. So the conclusion was that someone had pulled the print off of the print card to frame him, but he was denied a new trial. While he was incarcerated, he got his bachelor's degree. He helped other inmates get their GEDs. He became kind of a jailhouse lawyer and helped people with their appeals. He developed the educational system and library system in prisons that we still use today. William Heirens was in prison for 65 years, the longest sentence in Illinois history. He died at the age of 83 from complications with diabetes. So that's the story of William Heirens, the lipstick killer. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Do you think he was guilty? Do you think he did it? I have watched several documentaries, read articles, and it's still 50-50. Like, people in Chicago still believe that he did it. My sources for this was the show A Crime to Remember. It's a season 5, I think, episode 2, and it's called The Battle Days. Because it was really tried in the media. Everybody thought that he did it before he was even sentenced because of everything that the newspaper said. And also, as part of his confession, he knew things that he wouldn't have known, supposedly would not have known. But he admitted later that he actually got some of the details from the newspaper when he confessed. My other resources was the infographic show on YouTube. It's like a little 15-minute animated telling of the William Heirens story. So if you're squeamish and you want to check it out more, that would be a good place to start, because it's not gory or anything. It's a cartoon. My other source was American Justice, and that was the interviews that I watched. There were some interviews with him in the documentary, as well as interviews with some police, some lawyers who think that he was guilty. And my other two sources were the Criminal Minds Wiki. That's also where I got all my pictures from. And Wikipedia. Now, back to the episode. At the end of the episode, you see Gideon drive up to a gas station. He goes in the gas station. He buys his snack or whatever, pays for his gas, and he sees pictures of women. They look like passport photos on a wall behind the cashier. And the cashier stuttered. Now, at the beginning of the episode, you see Gideon in class teaching at the FBI Academy, and they're talking about the footpath killer. And he said that he told the police when they found him, he would have a stutter. So he kind of puts two and two together when he sees this man that's about the right age. He sees the pictures of the women, and the guy stutters. So he has no backup. He's there by himself. So he kind of gets this weird look on his face and turns around and walks out of the store. Then, as he walks out of the store, the clerk comes out and points a shotgun at him. And that's the end of the episode. So, if you want to know what happens to Gideon, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell, smash that like button. You'll get to find out what happens to Gideon, and we will talk more about the real crimes of Criminal Minds. Thank you guys. This has been so fun. Thank you. Please subscribe, like, share. See you later. Bye.